Greetings, fellow RotoBallers. It is time. It is week 7, and it's time for starts and sits. And Dave, I'm going to go first with a guy who is QB 20 right now in this league. This quarterback right now is QB 1000 in my heart, only averaging 233 passing yards a game. But I'm going with Aaron Rodgers versus the Commanders. I think he can put up a top 10 number. It's a bad defense, good matchup for a Hall of Famer. Give me Aaron Rodgers. He's a start.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say 3 words I've said a bunch my entire life. Sit Jared Goff. Okay. He's coming off a bye, and maybe they're getting back some weapons, but the matchup versus Dallas, folks, it's not ideal. Goff has thrown 4 interceptions in 5 games. Checks notes. Dallas defense has 5 interceptions this year. Goff takes a lot of sacks. Checks notes. Dallas defense has 24 sacks this season. Now, I get that people may not have a ton of options, but I can think of 16 names I prefer over Goff. Therefore, he's a sit. Let's move over to another position that people are struggling with, Joe, tight end. Now, you may be a little timid to start a guy who got you less than 5.5 fantasy points in 3 of his 4 last games, but I say Seattle defense can cure all woes. This is a get-right game for Gerald Everett. Start him with confidence. He still had 7 targets last week, and the Seahawks are the team that gave Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, and Taysom Hill their best games of the year, and I foresee that for Gerald Everett.
Let's move over to tight end sits. And Dave, this has never happened before, but can we honestly confidently say there's a tight end sit out there? Does anyone have during these bye weeks at week 7 someone that's scoring 5 or 6 fantasy points a game that they can sit for some other better backup option? There isn't right now. Why are we still doing tight ends in fantasy? I don't know. This week, we can't tell you to just sit anybody because you got to play pretty much anybody right now that'll get you 5 fantasy points. So I got nothing, Dave. We just got to move on to wide receivers.
Hey,
I'm
I get
punting.
it. I
I'm
get
punting
it,
this
Joe. I
week.
just watched Jawan Johnson catch 2 tutties. Okay. I have no idea what's going on. I'm going to
Punt.
say start Bengals, wide
Yes.
receivers, all of them, all 3 of them. I think they're absolutely going to build off the momentum from last week. You fire up Chase, you fire up Higgins. But I think if you're totally bereft of wideouts, Joey, you can throw Tyler Boyd in your flex because you look at the kind of wide receivers that have really cooked the Falcons. Cup, Tyler Lockett, Jarvis Landry, Mike Thomas, a lot of those names play a lot of snaps out of the slot. Start all your Cincinnati's.
Yeah, my wide receiver sit this week is a guy who got off to a hot start. Downfield production, it's tailed off. Only 44 receiving yards a game over his last 3 played. Scary Terry McLaurin going up against the Green Bay defense that's allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Only 1 touchdown to wide receivers over the last 3 games. It's just not a great week for him. You could probably find better options at the wide receiver position. So sit Terry McLaurin. Let's go to starts, Dave. And ooh, I like this one. And so do your 137 fab bucks that you spent to beat me out to get Kenneth Walker, who is our start this week versus the Los Angeles Chargers. This guy had 97 yards in the touch last week, 88-1 for the week before, going up against the Chargers defense that's allowing the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. 6 running backs have 12 plus fantasy points against the Chargers this year. Kenneth Walker, season saver, huge ceiling, possible stud. Start him up.
League winner. Worth all 137, Joe. And here's something that's going to be music to fantasy managers' ears. Sit Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? So frustrating to have this guy on your team. Clyde has not surpassed 9 carries or 33 rush yards in his last 2 games. He's in a 3-way committee in the KC backfield. And then you go to the other side of the ball. 49ers defense being the 2nd worst matchup for running backs. He's a flex play at best, but a headache at worst, Joey. Sit the Fresh Prince of Helaire.
Buckle up, everyone, because here comes our 60-second Week 7 start, sit, recap, starting right now. Here are the start sits for Week 7. Start, definitely Aaron Rodgers versus the Commanders. The Commanders have a bad defense. We think he's a top 10 quarterback, even though he's QB 20 right now. Gerald Everett, he's seeing the targets. We think it's a get-right game for him. Start Gerald Everett. The Bengals versus the Falcons secondary. Line them all up. Boyd, Higgins, Chase, make it happen. And then finally, Kenneth Walker, season saver versus the Chargers. Great matchup. Stud. Start him up.
And leave these following players on your bench, even during Mageddon. Goff is going to have 0 time to throw versus that Dallas pass rush. And a tight end, you really don't have a choice, but maybe you might have Kelsey or Andrews. But if not, we're saying you don't have to sit anybody. Scary Terry is a bit too frightening to sit again this week with Taylor Heineke. And finally, it's been up and down with CEH, but this week is a down week. It's the 49ers D. So, folks, like and subscribe.